Is Canada about to spend billions on a super jet that can't handle a standard Tuesday in Nunavut? While Lockheed Martin scrambles to protect its $400 billion empire, 7 nations have already walked away from the F-35, choosing Arctic-ready independence instead. As we stand at the threshold of our own $19 billion decision for 88 fighters, the stakes couldn't be higher. Is this about alliance loyalty? Or are we being sold a bill of goods that compromises our sovereignty? Today, we're deconstructing the Gripen domino effect and why Canada's choice will define our North for the next 40 years. Look, everyone, pull up a chair and listen closely, because what we're talking about tonight isn't just about airplanes or some dry government procurement contract. It's about the very soul of Canadian sovereignty and whether we still have the backbone to make our own decisions. You've seen the headlines, you've heard the whispers from Ottawa, and you've felt that nagging doubt in the back of your mind about where our billions of tax dollars are actually going. We are standing at a massive crossroads, a moment in history that will define the Royal Canadian Air Force for the next 40 or 50 years. And frankly, the walls are starting to close in on the giants in Fort Worth, Texas. I want you to think about this for a second. 7 countries. 7 nations have looked at the world's most expensive fighter jet, the F-35, and they've reached the exact same conclusion that many of us here in the Great White North have been shouting from the rooftops for years. It's too expensive, it's too complicated, and it might just be the wrong tool for the job we actually need to do. Just this past October, something happened that didn't make the front page of the Toronto Star, but it sent a lightning bolt through the entire defense industry. A 23-year veteran of Lockheed Martin, the guy in charge of international sales, just walked into his boss's office and quit. No gold watch, no goodbye party, just a resignation letter that spoke volumes because of what was sitting in his inbox that morning. The Czech Republic, a NATO ally, mind you, a country right on the front lines of the European theater, decided they weren't buying the American dream. They chose 24 Swedish Gripens. That single move wiped $4.2 billion off Lockheed's books. But it was so much more than that. It was the 7th domino to fall in 9 years. Does that sound like an anomaly to you? Or does it look like a pattern that even the most expensive lobbyists in Ottawa can't hide anymore? Let's be real here. Canada is looking at buying 88 of these F-35s to the tune of $19 billion for the initial purchase alone. But when you look at what happened in Brazil back in 2014, or Thailand, or Hungary, you start to see a different story. Brazil didn't just want a plane, they wanted the brains behind it. They chose 36 Gripens because Sweden offered total technology transfer and domestic manufacturing rights. They wanted to build their own future, not just rent it from the Americans. Then you've got Thailand, who bought 12 Gripens and never looked back because the operational costs of American fighters were just a black hole for their budget. Hungary. They've been leasing Gripens since 2006, and when the Pentagon tried to upsell them on the F-35 recently, they flat out said no. They're sticking with what works. Even Switzerland, a country that isn't exactly short on cash, saw a voter rebellion because their citizens realized that premium pricing doesn't always mean premium utility for their specific needs. And then there's the Czech Republic decision in 2023. That's the one that really broke the camel's back. They are a NATO member, they border the Russian sphere of influence, and they have full access to U.S. intelligence. They should have been a guaranteed customer for the F-35. But they looked at the math. They looked at the $5.6 billion price tag for 24 Gripens, which included a 30-year support package, and they realized that for their operational requirements, the F-35 was just overkill they couldn't afford to maintain. Colombia followed suit, choosing 18 Gripens over the F-35 and the Korean KF-21. Even Argentina is looking at used Gripens from Denmark because they know the F-35 is a financial impossibility. Do you see the picture forming yet? It's a $40 billion hole in revenue for Lockheed Martin. But the real panic isn't about the money they already lost. It's about us. It's about Canada. We are the eighth domino. And if we fall, if we decide that we've had enough of being told what to buy, the entire $400 billion export model for the F-35 could collapse like a house of cards. You have to understand the economics of this. The F-35 program is a $1.7 trillion beast. That's trillion with a T. The only way that math works is if they build thousands of them to drive the per-unit cost down. They need us. They need our $19 billion to keep their own lights on. But what happens to the cost of that jet if international buyers keep jumping ship? The volumes drop, the prices skyrocket, and the death spiral begins. I'm asking you, as someone who cares about our pilots and our sovereignty, why are we being pushed into a corner too? An internal Lockheed memo leaked to Defense News admitted that the Czech selection of the Gripen validates cost-conscious procurement strategies that threaten their position in 12 to 18 more markets. That's corporate speak for the secret is out. People are realizing that you don't need to buy a Ferrari to drive through a Canadian winter. In fact, a Ferrari is the last thing you want when you're 500 kilometers north of Yellowknife in the middle of January, isn't it? Think about the Arctic. This is our backyard. This is where we prove we are a sovereign nation. The F-35 is a stealth marvel, sure, but that stealth coating is like a delicate flower. It starts to degrade when the temperature hits -40. Now, I don't know about you, but in my Canada, -40 is just a brisk morning. We have bases in the high Arctic that don't have 9,000-foot paved runways. They don't have climate-controlled hangars that cost $500 million each. The F-35 needs those things just to survive. The Gripen? It was built by Swedes who know exactly what a real winter looks like. It can land on an 800-meter stretch of highway, be refueled by a couple of guys in a truck, and be back in the air in 10 minutes. It operates at -52 degrees without breaking a sweat. So tell me, why are we even considering a jet that needs a heated garage when we're supposed to be patrolling the harshest environment on Earth? It's about more than just the cold, though. It's about the money that comes out of your pocket and mine. Let's look at the calculation that's keeping the folks in Ottawa up at night. Buying 88 F-35s isn't just about the initial $19 billion. It's the 40-year life cycle. We're talking $77 billion for the F-35 versus $32 billion for the Gripen. That's a $45 billion difference. $45 billion. Do you have any idea what that kind of money could do for our Coast Guard? For our veterans? For our healthcare system? The Czech Air Force figured it out. They realized the F-35 has extra capability, but they asked the most important question. Do we actually need $45 billion worth of extra stealth just to patrol our own borders? Their answer was a resounding no. And don't let them tell you that choosing a European jet means we're abandoning our allies. That's the oldest trick in the book. Lockheed's been using what I call industrial blackmail. They point to the 110 Canadian companies making parts for the F-35 and tell us those 12,000 jobs will vanish if we don't buy the jet. But that's a lie. Those same brilliant Canadian workers can build Gripen components. They can build Canadian sovereignty. In fact, Saab has offered us something the Americans never will: total technology transfer. They want us to own the source code. They want us to be able to fix our own planes without having to ask permission from a server in the United States. Isn't that what being an independent nation is all about? We've seen the Pentagon hammer come down on us, too. We've had U.S. ambassadors making public statements, telling us they expect Canada to fulfill its F-35 commitments. Does that sit right with you? Since when does another country tell us how to spend our defense budget? It's made a lot of Canadians furious, and rightly so. It makes us feel like a subsidiary instead of a partner. This isn't about being anti-American. It's about being pro-Canadian. It's about looking at the facts and realizing that the fear factor Lockheed Martin has used for years is finally losing its grip. They're trying to run cost reduction theater now, putting out press releases saying the price is dropping. But the independent data doesn't lie. Every country that has done a real deep dive analysis, like the Czechs, has found that the promotional claims don't match the reality of operating these things. The F-35 is a high-maintenance diva, and we're trying to run a rugged, blue-collar Air Force on a budget. Can we really afford to be the eighth domino that saves Lockheed's bacon at the expense of our own national interest? We are 6 months away from a decision that will lock us in for the next half-century. The government says they're committed to the F-35, but behind the scenes, they've quietly commissioned a capability review. Why? Because the Arctic reality is hitting home. They're realizing that they might be buying 88 planes that can't actually fly from our northernmost bases without $1 billion in new construction at every single site. They're realizing that the $45 billion in savings could be the difference between a military that works and one that's just a showpiece for NATO cocktail parties. I want you to think about the legacy we're leaving for the next generation of Canadian pilots. Do we want them flying a jet where they have to ask a foreign corporation for permission to update the software? Or do we want them in a machine that we own, we control, and we know will start up when the wind is howling at 60 knots and the mercury has disappeared into the bottom of the thermometer? This is the moment where the Gripen domino effect meets the Canadian spirit. We've seen 7 nations find the courage to say, enough is enough. They've chosen fiscal sanity and operational common sense over the pressure of the military-industrial complex. The resignation of that Lockheed executive wasn't a fluke. The leaked memo wasn't a mistake. They are in a state of absolute panic in Texas because they know that if Canada walks away, or even if we just split the order to save $10 billion, their entire global business model shatters. We hold the cards. For the first time in a long time, Canada has the leverage. So, I'm asking you tonight, are we going to use it? Are we going to be the nation that finally says our sovereignty isn't for sale? Or are we going to fall like the rest, just to keep a broken system alive? The clock is ticking, and the decision we make in the next 6 months will echo for the next 30 years. This is our north, our money, and our future. Let's make sure we don't let it slip through our fingers just because we were too afraid to stand up and ask the tough questions. Stay with me, because in the next part of this breakdown, we're going to dive even deeper into the specific Arctic gaps the F-35 creates, and why the Five Eyes partnership might actually be stronger if Canada chooses the path of independence. You won't want to miss it, because what I'm about to show you is exactly what they don't want you to see in the brochures. This is the real math, the real strategy, and the real reason why the panic in Fort Worth is absolutely justified. We're just getting started. Now don't go anywhere, because we are pulling back the curtain even further on this Arctic gamble. We just talked about the global collapse of the Lockheed marketing machine. But let's bring this home to the tundra, to the ice, and to the taxpayers who are going to be on the hook for this $19 billion entry fee. Do you remember the Avro Arrow? Of course you do. Every Canadian over the age of 40 has that story etched into their DNA. The moment we had the best interceptor in the world, built right here, and we let it go because of political pressure and shifting winds. Well, I'm telling you, we are at an Avro Arrow moment once again. But this time, the threat isn't just a canceled project. It's a 40-year commitment to a platform that might actually make us less secure in our own backyard. Have you ever really looked at a map of our northern ADIZ, the Air Defense Identification Zone? It is a massive, unforgiving expanse of nothingness where the nearest backup is thousands of kilometers away. When a Russian Tu-95 Bear bomber tests our airspace, they aren't looking for a stealth fight. They are testing our endurance. They are testing our reach. And this is where the F-35's premium capability starts to look like a massive liability. Let's talk about the Arctic gap that the lobbyists don't want to mention in their glossy brochures. To keep an F-35 operational in places like Inuvik or Resolute, you don't just need a runway. You need a high-tech cocoon. We are talking about $500 million per base just for climate-controlled hangars because if that stealth skin sits out in a blizzard, it loses its edge. Does that sound like a rugged defender of the North to you? Or does it sound like a high-maintenance guest that we can't afford to host? The math we discussed, that $77 billion life cycle cost, isn't just a scary number I'm throwing at you. It is a weight that will drown every other branch of the Canadian Armed Forces. Think about our sailors. Think about our soldiers. If we are pouring $45 billion extra into a jet just to maintain its stealth in a region where there are no enemy radar installations to hide from, what happens to our new frigates? What happens to our search and rescue helicopters? The Gripen domino effect we are seeing globally is happening because other nations have realized that enough is better than too much, when too much bankrupts the rest of your military. The Czech Republic didn't choose the Gripen because they are cheap. They chose it because they are smart. They realized the 24 Gripens in the air today are worth more than 12 F-35s that are grounded because the maintenance budget ran dry. I want to talk to you about sovereignty, real hard-coded sovereignty. When we buy an F-35, we aren't just buying a plane. We are buying a subscription service. Every time a Canadian pilot flips a switch in that cockpit, the data is pinging back to servers in the US. We can't even change a line of code to integrate a Canadian-made sensor or a specific Arctic radio without asking for the keys from Lockheed Martin. Is that what we want for the next 40 years? To be a tenant in our own sky? The Swedish offer for the Gripen isn't just about a cheaper plane. It's about the keys to the kingdom. They are offering us the source code. They are offering to let us build the parts here, fix them here, and evolve them here. That is the legacy of the Arrow reborn, the ability for Canadian engineers to own the technology they fly. Why would we settle for anything less? Let's look at the Five Eyes argument, because that's the one they use to scare the politicians in Ottawa. They say, oh, if Canada doesn't buy the F-35, we won't be able to talk to our allies. Let me tell you, that is absolute nonsense. Do you think the Swedes, who are now NATO members, can't talk to the rest of the alliance? The Gripen is fully Link 16 compatible. It is integrated into the NATO structure as we speak. In fact, by having a mix of platforms, the alliance becomes stronger. If every country flies the F-35, and a single software bug or a specific vulnerability is found, the entire alliance is grounded. By Canada choosing a different path, a more rugged, independent path, we provide what military planners call strategic redundancy. We become the resilient backup that can operate when the stealth fleet is sidelined by infrastructure failures. And what about the jobs? Lockheed Martin loves to talk about those 12,000 jobs. But let's look at the fine print. Those jobs are contingent. They are part of a global supply chain where we are just a small cog. If we choose the Gripen, we aren't losing aerospace jobs. We are gaining an industry. We could become the global hub for Gripen maintenance and Arctic upgrades. We wouldn't just be assembling someone else's kit. We would be the masters of our own platform. Imagine the pride in Montreal, in Winnipeg, in Vancouver, knowing that the jets protecting our north are being kept in the air by Canadian hands, using Canadian code, and funded by a budget that actually makes sense. I'm looking at the clock, and I'm looking at the calendar. 6 months until the final decision. The 7th domino has fallen, and the panic in Texas is real because they know Canada is the tipping point. If we say no, or even if we say not for all 88, the export apocalypse they fear becomes a reality. Other nations like Poland, the Philippines, and Greece are watching us. They are waiting to see if Canada has the courage to prioritize its own geography over foreign political pressure. Are we going to be the nation that validates the cost-conscious model? Are we going to be the ones who prove that you can have a world-class Air Force without selling your soul to a trillion-dollar program? Think about the veterans watching this tonight. You know what it means to have equipment that works in the field. You know that fancy tech is useless if you can't fix it in a gale force wind. The Gripen was designed for a conscript to be able to change an engine in an hour on a roadside. The F-35 requires a clean room and a team of specialists. In a real conflict, where our main bases might be targeted, which one do you want your sons and daughters flying? The one that needs a billion-dollar home, or the one that can disappear into the woods and keep fighting? We are at an inflection point where our premium positioning is becoming a liability. The world is changing. The era of stealth at any cost is being replaced by the era of persistence and presence. We need to be present in the Arctic 365 days a year, not just when the weather is nice and the hangars are heated. We need to save that $45 billion so we can build the icebreakers we were promised, the drones we need for surveillance, and the support systems for our northerners. So I'm asking you, my fellow Canadians, those of you who remember when this country led the way in innovation, why are we settling? Why are we letting ourselves be bullied by industrial blackmail and cost reduction theater that doesn't hold up to scrutiny? The resignation of the Lockheed sales chief wasn't just a career move, it was a white flag. It was an admission that the Gripen is a threat because it is the right answer to a question that Lockheed doesn't want anyone to ask. We have 6 months to make our voices heard. We need to tell Ottawa that we've seen the math. We've seen the Czech decision. We've seen the Brazil model. We want a jet that fits Canada, not a Canada that has to be reshaped to fit a jet. We want sovereignty. We want fiscal responsibility. And we want an Air Force that can actually defend the North from the North. The Gripen domino effect is our chance to reclaim our independence. Let's not be the domino that stays upright just to support a failing empire. Let's be the nation that leads the way into a smarter, more sovereign future. This is the real fight. It's not just about aluminum and engines. It's about who we are as a people. Are we a nation that does what it's told? Or are we the nation that built the arrow, that tamed the North, and that knows how to stand its ground? The eyes of the world are on us. Lockheed Martin is sweating. The Pentagon is calling. But the only people who should have a say in this are the people who pay the bills and the pilots who fly the missions. Let's give them the tool that was built for our reality, not someone else's profit margin. Thank you for sticking with me through this deep dive. This is the conversation we need to be having at every kitchen table from St. John's to Victoria. The stakes are too high for silence. The $45 billion question is waiting for an answer. And I think we all know what that answer should be. Stay sharp, stay informed, and most importantly, stay proud of the country we are building together. This is our North, and it's time we acted like it. Good night, Canada. Let's make sure they hear us all the way in Ottawa and all the way in Texas. We aren't just another customer. We are the 8th domino, and we are standing our ground. If you value a sovereign Canada and want to keep this conversation going, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us get the truth out to more Canadians. I want to hear your take. Do you think protecting our Arctic sovereignty is worth the F-35's premium price tag? Would you rather see that $45 billion reinvested back into our own healthcare and veterans? And does the idea of owning our own tech, like the old Aero days, stir some pride in you? I'm looking forward to reading your comments. Take care of yourselves, stay proud, and God bless Canada.